but all the works they do to be seen by men. They made their phylacteries broad and enlarged the borders of their garments. They loved the best places at feast, the best seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. What are the phylacteries? They are called tefillin in Hebrews, and they are small leather cases. The Jews make them and tie them on their hands, and they put a piece of paper with Bible verses and often tie them around their foreheads. The Orthodox Jewish people make this. When people saw them, they thought they were living a very faithful life, a life according to the word. However, Jesus rebuked them. They made their phylacteries broad because they had a lot of pieces of paper to put in, and they're saying that they have a lot of words in them. They pretended as if they were holy, and Jesus rebuked them. They also enlarged the borders of their garments. So Orthodox Jews put a blue tassel on their thread, and it is called tzitzit in Hebrews. When you walk with that, you can clearly see the blue tassel moving back and forth as you move your arms while walking. God told them to do this so they could always remember God the Lord. However, they took that as a certain type of fashion style, and Jesus rebuked them, of course. And what else did he say? In verse 10 it says, "And do not be called teachers, for one is your teacher, the Christ. But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant." God is telling us this. Now let's think about this. Why do we want to be acknowledged by people? What makes you chase after that? That's because you look down on God. You often forget that God is watching over everything. So their faith is full of self-consciousness, doing things in front of people's eyes. One thing that we have to think about is how God is looking at me, instead of thinking how he or she next to me is thinking about me. Sometimes misunderstandings happen between human relationships. I never intended it this way, but the other takes it completely wrong. Things happen, right? And how can we manage our anger or frustration here? Remembering that God knows everything, right? God knows. No matter what kind of comments people say about you, God knows the truth. And one more thing, we can't live our Christian life while explaining every small details of my intention. So don't bother, and always remember that God sees everything and God knows everything. So you need that kind of attitude in your faith life. Unless your heart will fluctuate. As long as you have that attitude, you'll be able to live as a faithful Christian no matter what happens. The missionaries are a good example of that because they get isolated and they're in a foreign land, so no brethren are next to them. But how do they manage their life over there? If they live their Christian life with self-consciousness and pleasing people, then they would fall as soon as they get there. Because when a person leaves the group of people where he or she belonged, then their moral sense decreases. That's the character of human. But the missionaries faithfully go to the foreign land and preach the gospel and build a church, right? And the reason why is because they have this great attitude. There are so many things that they can't explain. They go through so many hardships. They can't explain, and they don't have to because God knows. Let's say you did something good, but the result didn't turn out as you expected. That happens, and that it's okay. God sees and he knows. And there's one really important thing here. We often think that we receive help from people around us, right? However, the truth is that helps come from God. He sees, he knows, he gives. I held on to these 3 phrases when I was out of town as a missionary, and that is sufficient. Let's go to Matthew chapter 6. If we take all the blessings in a humanly perspective, then we will bother ourselves so much trying to flatter in front of people. Let's look at this verse here, chapter 6, verse 1. Let's read it together. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Who said this? The one who gives the reward said this, Jesus Christ. The one who gives the reward clearly said that those who try to be seen by people will have no reward. He firmly said this. So, if all my works in ministry, if your motivation is people around you, then will you have reward or no? No, right? The one who gives the reward said so. So you may expect a grand reward, but you can end up receiving this small amount when you actually stand before Him. That can happen if your motivation is not right. However, if your motivation is God, then of course you will receive a huge reward. Let's go to verse 3 also. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will Himself reward you openly. What does this verse mean? It may sound abstract, but let's think about this matter. Let's say the right hand did something. But how can the left hand not know this, right? What do you think? Is it possible that the left hand does not know what the right hand did when they are attached to the same body operated in one brain system? There's only one way. Cutting your arm off? No, not that one. But the only one way is when the right hand does something and the right hand forgets what he did, not remembering it. Then the left hand will forget too and will not know what the right hand did. So this verse here is similar to this metaphor. When our right hand does something good, we remember it until the end, right? Recall it. And some people write things down to remember. Then the left hand will know this forever. And God is telling us to forget after doing good deeds, right? In Luke chapter 14, there's a story of the righteous man, and the characteristic of the righteous man in that chapter is that they forget. After feeding the poor and doing a good deeds, they don't remember, they do not know. Let's find it actually, Luke chapter 14. From verse 12, when we read these, you'll be able to comprehend how this works. I'll read them. Luke chapter 14, verse 12. Then he also said to him who invited him, when you give a dinner or a supper, do not ask your friends, your brothers, your relatives, nor rich neighbors, lest they also invite you back and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just. From verses 12 to 14, who are the recipients of this message? These messages are for those who will partake in the resurrection of the just, correct? For you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just, here it says. So here are two important parts. One, at the end of verse 12, lest they also invite you back and you be repaid. That one. And the other, verse 14, because they cannot repay you. Those two phrases, compare those two parts. For example, let's say I gave $1,000 to one brother who's really, really poor. I just gave it. And later in the future, this brother became so successful in his business and repaid me $2,000. What is this situation then? I'm done. I won't receive any. Understood? This is a beautiful story, of course. This is a beautiful story. However, it's just a beautiful story and that's it. I won't have grand reward. However, on the other hand, let's say I help someone who has nothing to do with me. Who has nothing. I helped him or her and we went our separate ways. Can he or she repay you or no? Things like this will be your reward. There are people who are not able to pay you back because they cannot repay you. This is the core. This is the core message. I helped him, but he cannot pay me back. There, we must invest our time. When the resurrection of the just happens, who will compensate for that? God. God will. Retreats are like that. Who knows who cleaned the facility and who knows who sanitized the building, right? However, thanks to someone, we can hold the retreat without any mosquito attacks. Thanks to those little stuff, people get connected and receive salvation. But those newly born again brethren, they cannot repay, right? That's why our ministries are so valuable. Mission trips are like that too. Let's say I gave a special offering for the mission trip. I don't know who received salvation over there in a foreign land, but I just pay, and I cannot get them back. It's impossible. But who gave them back? God compensates. So this is truly a wise investment. You gotta think about this deeply. Amazing profit will be given. God is clearly telling us that promise. When your focus is on people, you can easily think, oh, I sacrificed so much for him. Will he be able to render them back? And you become stingy. Oh, I helped his brother a long time ago, but still, why am I not receiving any from him? Did he forget? How ungrateful. Well, how thankful it is if he forgets, right? If he doesn't pay you until the end, you will gain a better profit. Things like that happen when we evangelize. I helped someone and invested so much time and effort. However, that person knows nothing. However, a better profit will be given later. The person is not even considering rendering back, but just remind yourself, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just. So we have to lower our eyes. God is taking care of me like that. So, just like how I mentioned before, invest not only your materials, but also time to those who are not able to repay. Investing time is something really irreversible. Let's say I served someone for a year or two. Here are some of the brethren who are in church school teachers ministry, right? They struggle a lot with them for 3 years of youth group. And these rascals never change. Every Sunday they come up and doubt their salvation, right? They say things like, teacher, the reason why I can't live a good Christian life is because perhaps I'm not saved. And they disappear for 1 month, and teachers go to visit them and treat them with good foods. And the next week Sunday, they show up, right? Teachers do that for 3 years, and the students, they leave to somewhere else for their college or university without even saying goodbye. And I invested 3 years of time to serve these little ones. You can't get them back, right? But who compensates? God. We must know that we are not working in vain. And among those children, there are actually a lot of students who come back as a young adult and live a really faithful Christian life later on, going on a mission trip and everything. Do you really think those 3 years of time you invested are meaningless? Never. So, investing my material and time to those who cannot repay, God will give all of those back. That is God's righteousness. If I did something but there's no result following it, then we can't say God is a fair judge. Just like a bank, he pays back. And we can truly believe his promise. My Father God who sees in secret, he truly pays back. Colossians chapter 3, verse 22. Colossians chapter 3, verse 22 to 24. Bondservants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Okay, everyone, repeat after me. For you serve the Lord Christ. We do work in the company, and we do our businesses in the world, with people of the world, right? But we cannot forget this. I am serving the Lord Christ. At where? They're at work. We deal with humans, but we are aware of whom? We're aware of God. That is our identity. But let's see. I worked in the company to serve the Lord. I sold the things to serve the Lord. And I did something for the Lord. But who gives you the reward? You gotta think it wisely. But who gives you the reward? In verse 24 it says the Lord. If you have misunderstanding in this concept, you can easily think that the boss promoted you. I worked hard and my salary increased, and you will think your boss did it for you. However, who do we serve? The Lord. So wherever we're at the workplace, in school, if we truly remember that we are serving the Lord, He will give us the reward. Otherwise, you'll be like the slave of a man. We are born-again Christians and God is supposed to use us. But if my boss uses me, and if my customer uses me, if that happens, something's quite wrong. So we must remember that the reward is from God. Let's go to James chapter 1, verses 16 to 17. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Do not be deceived. He wrote this because there are a lot of people who are being deceived, right? Do not be deceived about what? 17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. So what is the subject here? God is invisible and He is light, no variation or shadow of turning. So we may think He's not watching us. However, don't deceive yourself or don't be deceived. And one more, every good gift and every perfect gift comes from where? From above. When we say this to the people of the world, it won't work because they think all the gift or fortune come from their amount of work. My salary equals the amount of work I did. That kind of logic. But born-again Christians are different because He has no variation and no shadow of turning. It may seem He's not there, but truly, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. Let's say you have a good workplace score or reputation. What do you say? Oh, thank you, my boss. Instead, pray to God first. God, thank you so much. Your salary increased. Who should you be thankful to? The leader of your team in the company? No, God first. Why? It came from above. We often get confused because of this. When this kind of situation happens, we say to ourselves, but I'm not the only one who got an increased salary. Because people around me who are not saved also receive the same thing. How can I explain this, Luke? God allows the same blessing to the people around me to bless me eventually. Take it that way. Abraham became the root of the blessing, right? Abraham deserved the blessing because he obeyed God's command. But think about other Israelites around him who received the same blessing. What did they do, to be honest? Nothing. But because Abraham was the root of the blessing for the whole nation, they also received the blessings. Likewise, born-again Christians. I did a good job in my workplace, and me and my teammates received a bonus payment. At first, you say, thank you, Lord. And you look around and realize that everyone else has it too. The thankful heart disappears. See, God gave the same blessing all around me to give me that very blessing. Because I myself is the subject for Him. His focus is on me. Why? Because if I'm the only one who received the bonus payment, then I'll end up like Joseph. People will envy and be jealous of me. There's one young sister that I know. She took the test, the exam for college transfer. She had a certain school in her mind that she really wanted to go, but they picked only one person from the exam that she took under school's regulations. Only one student. But she took the exam and she got the 4th place. In this situation, the only way she could enter that school is when all the other 3 students give up their enrollment, right? There's no way, right? And she prayed to God earnestly. So, in order to take those 3 out, what does God have to do? He has to send those 3 students to an even better college. And God sent those 3 to an even better college. And that 4th place sister got into the school. That's how God works. Why do we think only we have to receive the great blessing? To give me blessings, God gives others blessings too. So we have to think about this and we cannot forget this part. So you can't say things like, I'm the only one, I'm not the only one, why should I be thankful? Instead, you need to think, those people receive blessing because of me. That's God's work, and there's no problem for Him. He's almighty, He has everything. So God is encouraging all the born-again Christians to live that way. We're in the middle of His provision all the time, but we're oblivious about it. That's quite sad. We always have to have the right motivation. If we have the right motivation, we can easily know that God is working for me. We often compare ourselves, right? Try to do as much as others, or try to do a little more than others to receive more. It's so important to have the right motivation and attitude before God's eyes. So Jesus clearly told us what? Trying to be seen by man, no reward for that. So when we enter into heaven, we'll see something very unexpected.